May 1940, Dover, England. A fisherman stands on the beach staring across the English Channel. 26 miles away, France is burning. 300,000 British soldiers are trapped at Dunkirk, backs against the sea, German tanks closing in. If they die, Britain has no army left. The fisherman looks at his small boat, 30 feet long, built for catching cod, not rescuing armies. His son is over there, somewhere in that hell. He unties the rope, starts the engine. Alone, he heads toward the gunfire. He does not know that 600 other fishermen, ferry captains, and weekend sailors are doing the same thing. They do not know that this impossible rescue will save Britain. And they do not know that one man, mocked and dismissed for decades, refused to let them surrender. Winston Churchill, 65 years old, called a warmonger, a drunk, a has-been, about to become the man who saves the world. But first, he has to stand completely alone. This is that story. The world is ending. Imagine this. You wake up tomorrow, turn on the news, France has fallen, Germany controls all of Europe, Canada has been invaded, Mexico has surrendered, America stands alone, no allies, no help coming, enemy forces massing across the border, invasion imminent. The experts say resistance is futile. Your own government wants to negotiate surrender. What do? This is not imagination. This was Britain in May 1940. And one man said no. The speed of collapse. Let me take you back. 6 weeks earlier, April 1940. The British Empire is the most powerful on earth. France has the largest army in Europe. Together they are unbeatable. Everyone knows this. Everyone is wrong. May 10th. Germany invades France, Belgium, Holland. The Blitzkrieg, lightning war. A speed of warfare the world has never seen. Tanks, dive bombers, paratroopers, coordinated with radio communication. Holland falls in 5 days. Belgium in 18. France, the great fortress of Europe, crumbles. The French army does not just lose, it disintegrates. Within 2 weeks, German tanks reach the English Channel. 300,000 British troops retreat to Dunkirk, a small port town. Trapped between the Nazi war machine and the sea, they wait to die. In London, the British government watches in horror. Prime Minister Chamberlain, the appeaser, resigns in disgrace. Parliament needs a new leader, fast. They turn to the man they ignored for a decade. The 65-year-old they mocked as a relic. Winston Churchill becomes Prime Minister on May 10th, the same day Germany invades. He inherits a catastrophe. The man nobody wanted here is what you need to understand about Churchill in 1940. Nobody wanted him. Not the king. Not the Conservative Party. Not the public. He was the last choice. The desperate choice. Why? Because for 10 years, Churchill had been warning about Hitler while everyone pursued peace. They called him a warmonger, Churchill the drunk, Churchill the has-been who could not accept the modern world. He had been cast into the wilderness, ignored, dismissed. Now suddenly they need him. But even as Prime Minister, he is not trusted. His own war cabinet works against him. Lord Halifax, the Foreign Secretary, wants to negotiate with Hitler. The king barely speaks to him. The public does not know him. Churchill stands alone. And the weight he carries is unimaginable, the evacuation. Nobody believed possible. May 26th, Dunkirk, 300,000 men surrounded. German artillery zeroing in. The Royal Navy sends destroyers. But the port is destroyed. The beaches are too shallow for large ships. The math is brutal. At best, they might save 30,000 men. The rest will die or be captured. Then something happens that nobody planned. Small boats begin appearing. Fishing vessels, pleasure yachts, ferry boats, private sailboats, hundreds of them, crossing the channel, into the war zone, regular people, fishermen, dentists, accountants, old men and teenagers. They beach their boats, load soldiers, ferry them to the destroyers waiting offshore, go back for more. Under German artillery, under Luftwaffe attack. They do it anyway. For 9 days, this continues. By the end, 338,000 men are rescued. The newspapers call it the Miracle of Dunkirk, but Churchill knows the truth. He addresses Parliament on June 4th. His voice is steady but grim. Wars are not won by evacuations. He refuses to let people celebrate, because Britain now stands alone. France surrenders 3 weeks later. June 22nd, Hitler throws a victory parade down the Champs-Élysées. Britain has no allies, no army capable of invasion, no way to win. Churchill stares at maps in the war rooms beneath Whitehall. Everyone expects him to negotiate. Everyone is wrong. The decision that changed everything, May 28th, before Dunkirk is complete. War Cabinet meeting. Lord Halifax stands. Proposes using Italy as an intermediary. Negotiate terms with Hitler now while Britain still has some leverage. We cannot win, Halifax argues. Germany controls Europe. We have no allies. Negotiation is the only rational choice. Several ministers nod. The logic is sound. Churchill listens in silence. Then he stands. If this Long Island story of ours is to end at last, let it end only when each one of us lies choking in his own blood upon the ground. The room freezes. Halifax persists. This is emotional thinking. We must be practical. Churchill's voice drops, becomes deadly quiet. Nations that go down fighting rise again. Those that surrender tamely are finished. But Halifax has support. The cabinet is divided. Churchill does something unexpected. He calls in the outer cabinet. 25 additional ministers, men not paralyzed by proximity to power. He asks them one question. Should Britain negotiate with Hitler? The room is silent. Then one by one they speak. Fight, fight, fight. Every single one. Churchill's eyes fill with tears, something his colleagues have never seen. Thank you, he whispers. Halifax's proposal dies. Britain will stand alone. But the question remains. Stand and do what? How does Britain win? Nobody knows. Not even Churchill. Words as weapons. Churchill cannot send armies to defeat Hitler. Britain has none. He cannot call on allies. Britain has none. So he uses the only weapon he has. Words. June 4th. Parliament. After Dunkirk. We shall go on to the end. We shall fight in France. We shall fight on the seas and oceans. We shall fight with growing confidence and growing strength in the air. We shall defend our island, whatever the cost may be. We shall fight on the beaches. We shall fight on the landing grounds. We shall fight in the fields and in the streets. We shall fight in the hills. We shall never surrender. Notice the rhythm, the repetition. We shall fight. We shall fight. We shall fight. This is not accidental. Churchill has spent days crafting these words, testing every phrase, every pause. He understands something the technocrats do not. In the darkest hour, hope is a choice, and words can create hope. June 18th. France has fallen. Britain is alone. Churchill speaks again. The Battle of France is over. The Battle of Britain is about to begin. Upon this battle depends the survival of Christian civilization. Upon it depends our own British life and the long continuity of our institutions and our empire. Let us therefore brace ourselves to our duties and so bear ourselves that if the British Empire and its Commonwealth last for 1,000 years, men will still say this was their finest hour. Their finest hour. Not their darkest. Their finest. He is reframing catastrophe as opportunity. Defeat as destiny. It is brilliant. And it works. Britain believes. But believing is not the same as surviving. The Blitz. September 7th, 1940. The Luftwaffe, the German Air Force, changes strategy. Instead of targeting airfields and radar stations, they target London. The civilian population. 300 bombers darken the sky, drop thousands of tons of explosives. The East End burns, entire neighborhoods erased. Hundreds dead in one night. The bombers return the next night, and the next, and the next. For 57 consecutive nights, London is bombed. Hitler's calculation is simple. break civilian morale, force Britain to surrender through terror. Churchill refuses to hide in bunkers. Instead, he walks the streets. The morning after a raid, he tours the devastation. No armored car, no heavy security, just Churchill, 65 years old, cigar in his teeth, walking through smoke and rubble. He stops where a family digs through ruins. An old woman looks up, recognizes him. Tears streak her soot-covered face. Churchill kneels beside her, places his hand on her shoulder, then stands, turns to the growing crowd. "Are we downhearted?" he shouts. The woman straightens. Others stop digging. More emerge from the ruins. "No!" they roar back. Churchill raises 2 fingers. The V for victory sign. The crowd erupts. That night, Churchill sits alone in his study, reading casualty lists. His secretary finds him weeping. "Every name is a mother's son," he whispers. Then he wipes his eyes, lights a fresh cigar, returns to work. This is leadership, feeling the weight, then carrying it anyway. The loneliest autumn, October 1940. Britain has survived the summer. The RAF defeated the Luftwaffe in daylight combat. Hitler postpones invasion, but Britain is still alone, still surrounded, still slowly being strangled. German U-boats sink supply ships, food is rationed, fuel is scarce. America watches from across the Atlantic, sympathetic but neutral. Churchill writes letter after letter to President Roosevelt, begging for help, for weapons, for ships. Roosevelt wants to help, but American law forbids it. Congress will not allow entry into another European war. Churchill sits in the cabinet war rooms late at night, studying maps. How do you win when you cannot attack? When you have no allies? When the enemy controls a continent? The answer is, you do not win. You survive. You hold on. You refuse to surrender. You wait for the world to change. This is the loneliest kind of leadership. Leading when you cannot see the path forward. Trusting that holding the line is enough, even when you are not sure it is. December 1941. The world changes. December 7th. Japan attacks Pearl Harbor. America is finally, unavoidably, in the war. Churchill is at Chequers, his country estate, when the news arrives. He weeps, but this time from relief. Hitler's fate is sealed, he says. Mussolini's fate is sealed. As for the Japanese, they will be ground to powder. He is right. With America's industrial might, the tide will turn. But it will take years. Years of grinding warfare. Years of more death. Churchill knows this, accepts it. Because survival was never about quick victory. It was about refusing to surrender until help arrived. The price of standing alone. The war grinds on. 3 more years. Churchill makes mistakes, strategic errors, failed operations. But he never wavers on the core conviction. Never negotiate, never surrender. June 6, 1944. D-Day. Allied forces storm the beaches of Normandy. The invasion Churchill spent years planning, obsessed over every detail. It succeeds. May 8, 1945. Victory in Europe Day. Nazi Germany surrenders. Churchill stands before massive crowds in London. The man they did not want, the 65-year-old relic. He led them through 5 years of total war. 2 months later, Britain holds elections. Churchill loses, after everything, after saving the nation, after leading through the darkest hours. The British people vote him out. He is hurt, deeply, but he accepts it. Democracy means accepting the people's choice, he says quietly, even when it breaks your heart. What it meant here is what Churchill proved in those 5 years. That leadership is not about having all the answers. It is about refusing to accept defeat when defeat seems inevitable. In May 1940, every rational voice said, negotiate, surrender, save what you can. Churchill said no, not because he knew Britain would win, but because he knew surrender meant the end of everything worth preserving: freedom, democracy, civilization itself. Some things are worth fighting for even when you cannot see how to win. That is what Churchill understood. and that is why we remember him. The lesson for today. If you are facing something that seems impossible, if every expert tells you to quit, if the rational choice is to surrender, remember Churchill in May 1940, alone, surrounded, no allies, no army, no path to victory. He stood anyway, not because he was certain of success, but because standing was the only choice that mattered. If stories like this remind you what real courage looks like, consider subscribing, because history is full of moments when one person's refusal to surrender changed everything, and we need to remember them, especially now. Winston Churchill died January 1965, age 90. His funeral was the largest Britain had ever seen. World leaders came from everywhere, enemies and allies alike, but perhaps the most powerful moment was silent. As his coffin passed, the cranes along the River Thames bowed. Dock workers lowered them in salute. These were working men. Many had lived through the Blitz, remembered the bombings, the fear, the darkness, and they remembered the old man who walked among them, who refused to let them surrender, who stood alone so they did not have to. That is leadership. Not speeches, not strategy, but presence in the darkest hour, when standing seems impossible. Churchill stood, and the world is different because he did. Never give in, never give in, never, 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 never. He spoke those words at Harrow School in 1941, but he lived them in May 1940, when the entire world was ending, and one man said no. Subscribe if you understand why that matters, because it always will.